Springfield's Talk 1041. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show on this grand Wednesday. My name is Nick Reed, streaming live, KSGF.com, our Pyramid Roofing Company. Talk and text line 447-KSGF. I want to thank Darren Chappell, James Clary, Monday and Tuesday, for filling in for me while I was just away for a couple of days. A lot of sort of interesting yet completely predictable stuff occurred. I was having a conversation with someone, and it was, of course, Hunter Biden related. And I said, it was just a couple weeks ago on air. Sarah and I had this discussion about, so when do you think he's going to announce he's pardoning Hunter?
I know. And I said, who even knows?
Yeah.
And boom, a couple days later.
and
Like you predict these things.
Well, and I'm pretty sure I would have said there's a good chance it'll be around the holidays because less people are paying attention to what's going on. They're not really tuning in. They don't feel like tuning in. And so oftentimes if you make some sort of move or announcement that is not going to be politically advantageous, or it's politically advantageous for your opposition, you do it on a Friday, around close of shop time, or you do it around a holiday, whenever the least amount of people are going to be paying attention, for a number of different reasons, just busy out of normal schedule, or you just don't want to listen to that sort of stuff. The family's over, you kind of got out of the mode of it, and you just don't want to hear it. And so sure enough, that announcement was made. Now, the thing that just absolutely entertains me is the just shock over it all.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? I can't. I do make myself stand back and think, all right, particularly these Democrats. Now, I think with Republicans, some of it's sort of fake shock in order to demonstrate how corrupt it is. Because I just cannot imagine any Republican being shocked by that. I mean, if they truly are, then they are so out of touch with reality. Now, when it comes to Democrats, however, that's my initial instinct. Like, well, of course they knew he was going to do this. They can't be that stupid. But then I stand back and I reflect on people that I know that are Democrats that aren't stupid people, but because they have been trained to only listen to an echo chamber, trained to believe that anything else is a lie. Anything that you hear on SRN News is a lie. Anything you hear on Fox News is a lie. Anything that you hear on Newsmax is a lie. You can only get your information from NBC, CBS, ABC, MSNBC, CNN. And even then, many of them genuinely believe that those outlets are sympathetic to Trump and Republicans. This is how, it is brainwashing that they've become. And I think that it is possible that when they were out there not questioning Joe Biden's assertions, that absolutely not, would not pardon Hunter. Wouldn't do it. Won't do it. Will not do it. Not going to consider it. Absolutely under no circumstances. And they really touted that out as, see how virtuous he is. See what a wonderful, honest president he is. This is why he's clearly so much better than Donald Trump. And I have to believe that there are some Democrats that it is brainwashing. It really, truly, genuinely is, that it would never even have crossed their mind that this is something that was going to happen, when normal people are like, well, of course he's going to do this. Well, but he said he wouldn't. Oh, okay. All right. And as usual, for what we're seeing in a bit of a chorus here, and there's a diversion to some degree, and we'll talk about that, but the very people who were trashing on anyone who claimed that Joe Biden was probably lying when he made the claim, he would never give that pardon, The same people that were out there on the left holding Joe Biden up as so virtuous because of his refusal to wade into the lake of corruption by potentially offering up a partner are the same people today who are defending him for doing it. The exact same people. And this is a typical two-step of sorts that the left really does, to a large degree, monopolize, and that is you deny, but then whenever it is proven that you are wrong, you justify. First deny, then justify. So you deny that, in this instance, Joe Biden was lying. You deny that he would ever pardon, but then when he does, you don't say, gosh, we were wrong and we're disappointed. Though, again, some are taking that position, and we'll talk about that. But for the most part, you justify it. Well, he had no choice. Oh, he had no choice. He's just a father. He's just a father who loves his son. Oh, I would have done the same thing. Well, then you probably shouldn't be a public servant. There's a difference between understanding how and why somebody does something that is corrupt versus saying, well, yeah, I'd do the same corrupt thing. And that is what this detachment from morality, and instead having the situational morality, which people redefine morality as, well, just whatever I would feel like doing at the time. And so there's the Republican Congressman Tuberville. Oh, yeah, I understand. I would have done the same thing if it were my son. Well, then you should resign your position as an elected official. If simply because you recognize, well, that's something I would want to do, so that means that I would. That corrupt thing that has been done, yeah, I get it, so I would do it too. That's a much different position than, well, listen, I understand, but it's still wrong. And if I would do that, I would be wrong as well. Have the weather coming up in mere moments. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 57. Tonight clear with a low around 20. For your Thursday, sunny with a high near 32. And on Friday, sunny with a high near 44.
I want to welcome to the KSGF family Grizzly Industrial. Many of you probably have seen it. It's amazing when you live in an area and you're very familiar with what I would say is probably just in the minds of a lot of people a landmark, but you still don't really even know exactly what it is. And I know for a long time, I would pass by it there on South Kansas Expressway and Battlefield and just think, well, that must be for industry, metal workers and woodwork, all industry. And I had no idea until it was several years ago, because I had a friend who was a wood turner, and I learned what that meant. And this was probably a decade ago or so, that Grizzly there is fully open to the public. And they've been in Springfield for over 25 years. They have, and you could tell just by looking at hundreds of thousands of square feet of warehouse space with machines, accessories, parts in stock for immediate delivery. And they do deliver out of there to all over the world. They are the largest woodworking and metalworking showroom in the world, with over 35,000 square feet, which is pretty impressive. So if you are somebody that does or have an interest, or you know someone who has an interest when it comes to metalwork or woodworking, I definitely recommend you check it out. They've got incredible deals in December going on. They always have scratch and dent items up to 60% off, and they're non-commission, so you're not going in to get sold or anything. But I just always love it when we have new partners on the station that have been part of Springfield. As long or longer than the station in some instances, and that's the case with Grizzly, and just really happy to have them on, and encourage you to stop by and check them out there. And it's just widely open to the public. I know sometimes you drive by, like I said, and it doesn't seem like it would be, but they certainly are. So welcome Grizzly Industrial to the KSGF family. And we are going to later again talk about some of the latest developments with the Hunter Biden situation. And I love the Democrats really trying to find position on this, because you do have some that are in full defense mode, some portraying Biden as having absolutely no chance whatsoever, because no choice whatsoever, because Trump is evil. I mean, literally with these people, everything is because Donald Trump is bad. Everything is because Donald Trump is bad. But there are a number of other things that, because of that story, they fly under the radar. And one of the stories is a massively comprehensive 2-year-long investigation into the coronavirus pandemic. And this has been released. This was a select subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic. And the headline, if you will, of their findings after this exhaustive research was that the vaccine mandates were not supported by science, and the mask rules were absolutely useless. The subcommittee wrapped up its report, which has been described as the, quote, single most thorough review of the pandemic conducted to date. A summary of the report shows that the committee concluded that COVID-19, quote, most likely emerged from a lab in Wuhan, China. And it provided 5 strong arguments to back the lab leak theory up, which included, among others, the fact that the virus possesses a biological characteristic that is found absolutely nowhere in nature. Also, the fact that Wuhan is the home to China's foremost SARS research lab, which has a history of conducting gain-of-function research at inadequate biosafety levels. The committee highlighted a variety of findings in various sections of the report. There is, of course, obviously, the section devoted to the vaccine mandates. A summary of the 520-page report concluded that, contrary to what was promised, the COVID-19 vaccine did not stop the spread or transmission of the virus. Now, to some degree, this is pretty obvious, right? I mean, it's why they are constantly still telling people, well, you only have 8 vaccines? How about 8 more? Keep getting them over and over and over again. One of the biggest problems that we had in dealing with the coronavirus is the redefining of what is culturally accepted as the term vaccine. Vaccine, once upon a time, meant that, oh, you take the vaccine, you don't get the thing. You want to not get polio? Get the vaccine. You want to not get tuberculosis or whatever else there are for the dozens of different vaccines out there, you get the vaccine, and then you will not get these particularly devastating diseases because it prevents you from getting them. Well, when it came to COVID, the term vaccine was redefined to essentially describe what any sort of over-the-counter remedy would do, and that is lessen the symptoms. You know, you have inflammation, you go buy some ibuprofen, you feel a cold or flu coming on, you go get the vitamin C stuff or, whatever. There's all these different over-the-counter items that take what otherwise would be more serious symptoms, Theraflu being another one, and it lessens the symptoms for you. And that's what the COVID vaccine would do. And then, of course, those with whom the symptoms could be devastating, the extremely elderly, those who are immune compromised, it could be life-saving because the symptoms would take people already vulnerable and push them over the edge to death. The whole flu vaccine situation can, thrown in there, I think has also, because of a lack of explanation and education on flu vaccines, it has diminished the belief, even prior to COVID, about the effectiveness of vaccines because they just push, oh, you don't want to get the flu, you don't want to get the flu, so get a flu vaccine. Well, what they don't generally explain, to the detriment of their efforts, is that the development of these flu vaccines are done in anticipation of what the upcoming flu strain is going to be of many. And so what occurs is if you get the flu vaccine, it is for a certain strain or maybe multiple different strains, and then some new variation will pop up, and then you find yourself sick. And so a lot of people get a flu vaccine, they still get the flu, and they think flu vaccines don't work. Well, the flu vaccines do to a degree, but what happens is they don't necessarily explain that, well, it'll work for some flu strains, but not others. And I think, honestly, the reason that they don't tell you that is because they think that diminishes the likelihood that you'll get that vaccine. So instead, they make you believe, oh, it'll prevent you from getting the flu. So you had that leading into COVID, in which they just flat out lied to people about the effectiveness of it and redefined in that context vaccine as simply being something that lessens the symptoms. So that's one of the findings in the report that, again, it seems so obvious because it's something that we just know this to be true. Additionally, the committee found that the vaccine mandates were the mandates themselves obviously were not supported by science whatsoever and actually caused more harm than good. Going to take a break. That portion of the findings next. I'm Nick Reed. COVID subcommittee finally, after a 2-year exhaustive deep dive, found that vaccine mandates were not supported by science and the mask rules were absolutely useless. And part of what they found, of course, is obvious. And those of us who take that scientific approach recognized early on that vaccines weren't vaccines. They were something that were lessening symptoms. They didn't prevent you from getting what it is that the focus was, that's COVID. They didn't prevent you from passing it along to someone else. And so this was another instance in which the left and the elites in this country just completely redefined something. Now, just lessening the symptoms makes it a vaccine. By that same argument, Theraflu is a vaccine against the flu. Tylenol is a vaccine against headaches. I mean, if we're going to continue to call COVID or these COVID shots vaccines, then everything that you find on the shelf in a pharmacy should also be labeled as a vaccine. Additionally, the committee found that the vaccine mandates were not supported by science whatsoever and actually caused more harm than good. Quote, the Biden administration coerced healthy Americans into compliance with COVID-19 vaccine mandates that trampled individual freedoms, harmed military readiness, and disregarded medical freedom to force a novel vaccine on millions of Americans without sufficient evidence to support their policy decisions, the summary read, noting that public health officials coordinated with each other to deliberately ignore the reality of natural immunity to the virus. In other words, they failed to craft policy with that reality in mind, aka science. Perhaps what is worse, the committee determined that there was mass government failure in the vaccine injury reporting system, which they noted, quote, created confusion, failed to properly inform the American public about vaccine injuries, and deteriorated public trust in vaccine safety during the COVID-19 pandemic. I remember in the very beginning when there were concerns within some in the general public about the safety of these vaccines. And the government assured us, hey, don't worry. There's this database. There's this vaccine injury reporting system. And this is going to be a place, and even told Americans that this is going to be publicly available information. So you don't need to worry about there being any sort of potential harm to a significant degree because you'll be able to see these reportings made in the system. Well, then it wasn't much time after that when the reporting began, and it was much more significant than many Americans were comfortable with. The exact same government entities were out there saying, well, now you can't trust that system. I mean, it's not really thoroughly vetted. We don't know for sure whether that person who had some sort of horrific medical emergency immediately after receiving the vaccine, if it was connected. We don't know this. And that was the real first sign that we were going to see that the elites exposed themselves as willing to flip on a dime, tell you the opposite of what they told you the day before, if it meant getting you to comply with their desires and wishes. That was the first real, tangible exposure that these people were not to be trusted. And it should be noted, and it shouldn't be forgotten, that when you have the same people who demand to this day that you trust all of these same people who lied to us, who conspired with one another to lie to us and to hide aspects of the vaccine that they didn't want us to know about, the vaccines, plural. That is what ultimately created the distrust. They love to paint people like RFK Jr. as conspiracy theory nuts. They love to paint Americans who just question, normal common sense question, the effectiveness of anything that the government tells us, here's what you should do and why you should do it. People who question it because it comes from the government as a source, whether or not the information is valid. They love to paint those people as anti-science. They love to paint those people as conspiracy theorists. But the reason that individuals question this information is because the people who put out the information have been caught lying over and over again. They earned it. They have no right to make any American feel like a conspiracy theorist. It's like, I always, because it's relationships, right? So I always analogize it to relationships. You're in a relationship with somebody that has been caught lying to you over and over and over again, and then they become indignant if they provide you some sort of information that seems pretty in line with what they've been caught lying about before, and they act like you're a nutcase because you don't trust them. When the reason that you don't trust them is because they have lied to you over and over and over again. It's what sociopaths do. And it's what has, of course, commonly become known as gaslighting. Springfield's Talk 1041, more ahead, traffic update. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Colorton, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 57, tonight clear with a low around 20. For your Thursday, sunny with a high near 32, and on Friday, sunny with a high near 44.
Earlier in the program, I was welcoming, which actually Monday they started with us, Grizzly and Industrial, to the KSGF family. But I'm not sure if you heard one of the ads there in the last break, and it was LSK Marine. And I want to welcome them as well. They're friends of ours in Lebanon. And I actually have, I mean, for me, it's a childhood connection because their facility is biking distance for a second grader to my grandparents' old house. My grandparents have passed on, but the house is still in sort of distant family. And the reason I say biking distance is because whenever at one point that facility was really focusing on selling like dirt bikes and three wheelers at the time. They had carved out of the land these sort of little jumps and everything, as I remember it, in order for people to test drive the dirt bikes and everything. And we decided it was the car boys who lived next door and some of the others in the neighborhood that we were going to ride our bikes over there so that we could do the riding in that facility. And we did that, and then it got dark, it got late, and so we were heading back to our respective homes, and then our parents, we heard them yelling for us, walking around with flashlights, and I remember we hid from it. Well, we thought we were going to be in trouble, and so we hid until they passed, and then we all went to our homes, like in our minds, we're like, well, we were here the whole time. Of course, we weren't. But just so my entire life, I was real familiar with that facility and that building, that business, and of course now it's over time it's evolved and boats are a huge focus, and they're just great people, and so it was kind of neat whenever we went over there some time ago to visit with them. And the fact that I was just a stone's throw away from my grandparents' old house. So
No, that's
anyway,
cool.
yeah. So definitely want to welcome LSK Marine to the KSGF family as well over there in Lebanon, and highly recommend that you stop by and give them a visit. There's a couple more things I wanted to mention. This subcommittee spent 2 years on what has been described as the single most thorough review of the pandemic conducted to date. And they found that the vaccine mandates weren't supported by science, and because of the coordinated lies of the different government entities, that they created a massive amount of distrust within the public, and not just for the COVID shot, which to me, that should have been a big focus of this report itself, is that it isn't a vaccine any more than Tylenol is a vaccine for headaches. But that, in the report, that in addition to that aspect of it, they, found that this distrust was created when it comes to all vaccines beyond COVID, because the people who are the voices we're told to listen to proved that they were dishonest and or incompetent. One of the two, maybe a little bit of both. Per the report, ultimately, a systematic review carried out by Cochrane Collaboration, one of the most highly regarded methodologies in evidence-based healthcare, found that the pooled randomized control trials they analyzed did not show a clear reduction in respiratory viral infection with the use of medical surgical masks, and that there were no clear differences between the use of medical surgical masks compared with N95 P2 respirators in healthcare workers when used in routine care to reduce respiratory viral infection. These results appear to directly contradict public health agencies and local government support for broadly requiring masking through much of the pandemic. And let's not forget even Fauci trying to wipe his hands clean of much of these revelations when it was revealed that there was absolutely no science whatsoever behind that 6-foot rule. There are some stores, and I don't think it's because of continued compliance, but they just don't take those stupid round stickers off the floor, or signs at the door that, remember, stay 6 feet apart. No science whatsoever behind that. None. Zero. Fauci, of course, was one of the mouthpieces for you got to do the 6 feet, otherwise you're going to kill grandma. And then his response was, hey, I just went with what they told me. I mean, everyone suddenly that was an expert, it was no longer accountable. Fauci, like, it wasn't my idea. I don't know where it came from. The overriding theme or conclusion of this project noted that trust is earned, accountability, transparency, honesty, and integrity will regain this trust. A future pandemic requires a whole America response managed by those without personal benefit or bias. We can always do better, and for the sake of future generations of Americans, we must. It can be done. So the report found that this was a tremendous amount of mistrust that was created, and that what has to occur is a rebuilding of trust in these institutions. Well, you cannot do that if there's no acknowledgement from those institutions that they were dishonest, that they were putting out information that was not based in science, that they were conspiring with one another in order to cover up information that contradicted their narrative, that they were pushing people to be censored and to be delegitimized who were taking the scientific approach. I mean, all of these things that these institutions were doing, there's never been any apology for it. There's never been any sort of reckoning in which they come out. Nobody's resigned. In fact, Fauci, I believe I saw, he was just at the White House being honored by Biden recently. That guy is still put up as some sort of hero, when he himself has acknowledged that he was spreading disinformation, but it wasn't his fault because, I don't know, that's just what the CDC told me. This is one of, listen, I understand that these committees are oftentimes for information gathering. I get that. And I think a lot of times some of these committees that only have so much power and, again, to investigate, they probably get frustrated because Americans, many Americans, including me, say, I'm tired of investigations that tell us, oh, yeah, they did something illegal, or, oh, yeah, they did something wrong, but then no one's held accountable. It's like you get tired of it after a while. And I understand that many times the people who are out there speaking for these committees, releasing these reports, are saying, listen, we don't have that power. Our job is to inform the public. Here's what happened. And then, at the ballot box, that's when the Americans can make the decision. But this still is a demonstration of the problem that we have in this country. And that is the lack of accountability and arguably the lack of those elected officials to hold these people accountable when they do this stuff. Now, I do believe this is part of the change that Trump recognizes needs to occur, and the RFK Juniors and these others, that we have to change the culture in Washington. We have to, in government in general, this complete and total lack of accountability. And it trickles down, and it is corruption. People oftentimes love to tell themselves, particularly if they're part of the corrupt culture, that corruption is just something that bad people do. It's stealing. When they know they're stealing, they're trying to screw someone over. But corruption is when you are in government, you're in a position of power, and you demonize citizens, you spread disinformation, and then when you realize perhaps that maybe you were a tool in all this, like local officials, hey, we're just listening to the experts. The corruption is that there's never any apology. I mean, I remember Mayor McCheese was on one of the national morning shows trashing on Springfield because of the spread of disinformation. He was on there because I think, Springfield popped up as having a spike or something. It was one of the cities that was used to demonstrate falsely that people not wearing masks and spreading disinformation was what was causing the spread of COVID and the overcrowding of hospitals. And so they had Mayor McCheese on to demonize people in the Springfield area, which he gladly did, and talked about disinformation. He's never apologized for any of that. The Greene County Health Department, any of these local institutions or local people that were shutting down businesses based off of what again, look at the 6-foot rule. I know, just because of personal relationships, of a number of businesses that had to shut down altogether because of the stupid 6-foot rule. And a lot of these were restaurants, because they were smaller, more intimate restaurants. You'd only be able to seat like 2 tables in the entire restaurant in order to accommodate these completely unscientific, arbitrary rules. So there were restaurants that shut down because of rules that the CDC quietly, and that Fauci quietly, and that these, NIH quietly have all admitted came from nowhere whatsoever. And you had the dutiful government officials destroy people's livelihoods based off of that. Have they ever apologized for that? I don't know of anywhere in this country. And I'm sure people like the so-called experts with Greene County Health Department, Mayor McCheese, and some of the council members or city managers that were out there, spreading the disinformation, probably, they, and maybe genuinely like, hey, listen, this is what I was told. Okay. But still, you could apologize. You could say you were wrong and tell us what you've learned from it. Like, maybe just because some bureaucrat in government or some department head that has a certificate saying that they're an expert, so you should never question them, that maybe you should question them. Doesn't mean that you have to automatically dismiss them out of hand. But this Soviet style, North Korea style, whatever the government says, must be the absolute Bible. And if you don't follow it, then you're going to be responsible for people dying. It's just an approach in which every person that was a cog in that wheel, knowingly or not, should be apologizing to the people that whose lives they destroyed, whose livelihoods they took away from them. And the fact that I'm not aware of any of these people, I certainly haven't been privy to any press conferences locally in which apologies were provided to those who were the victims of that form of governing. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company talk a text line. Sadly, but not unexpectedly, not one single person will be held accountable for any of the lies and misinformation. And this is the foundation of the continued distrust. And this 2-year most exhaustive report ever released, showing that vaccine mandates didn't work, that the government's handling of this created distrust, that the masks did not work, they didn't help in any meaningful way whatsoever. All of this, and the conclusion that trust needs to be rebuilt. How can you expect to rebuild trust when something of this magnitude is proven to be true, which most Americans have recognized for some time? But the response is, well, it's not bad enough for anyone to be fired. It's not bad enough for anyone to be held accountable in any way whatsoever. What message do you think that sends to the people who spread the disinformation? It's keep doing it. There's no reason to alter behavior. One of the text messages noting they haven't apologized because they feel that they have nothing to apologize for. They don't care about the people of Springfield, talking about the local government folks who are spreading disinformation. Just take along at all the trash on the city streets. If they cared, they'd clean up the streets and stop the root cause. But yeah, they don't feel they have anything to apologize for. And this is the way that the mind of the elites work, by the way. While us dumb folk were early on recognizing that some of the dictates, be they national or local, were coming down, that they didn't seem to make sense, or they contradicted previous dictates. The 6-foot rule, for example, merely saying, where did that come from? Why 6 feet? What? I mean, how is it so, like, 6.5 feet you're safe? What? Explain this. You were called anti-science. Now, of course, those of us who said that didn't make sense turned out to be correct. There was absolutely no science behind that whatsoever. Fauci himself admitted that. Everyone, the people behind the 6 foot, admitted that they made that up. No science to it whatsoever. Do the people who are in government that were spreading that disinformation look back and say, well, I guess the people who questioned it were right and we were wrong? No. See, they don't see you as being right for noting that it didn't make sense. They see it as, I mean, yeah, you may have been correct, but it wasn't because you knew better. It wasn't because you were taking the scientific approach and we weren't. You just happened to coincidentally stumble upon the truth. And once the truth was proven scientifically, which is what they did, then that's what makes something the truth. The truth isn't just the truth because it is to them. The truth only becomes the truth once they declare that it's the truth. So you were never right, and they were wrong. You were just little chatterboxes that were spewing out information, not knowing what you were talking about, while they were learning scientifically. So that's another reason why they don't feel that they owe any apology, because in their minds, it wasn't the people were right and we were wrong. Because the truth is what they say it is. And so what they were saying at the time was the truth, until they said it wasn't. Traffic update, I'm Nick Reed. All right. Trust in the FBI has plummeted to an historic low. And Democratic strategists revealing what Obama and Pelosi really think of Kamala Harris. This is all. I'm telling you, it is reputational recovery for some of these people, and the Obamas in particular. Their reputations have been tremendously damaged, and there's an attempt here to repair that. All that in the upcoming hour. there's a really great text on the Pyramid Roofing Company Talk a Text line asking, just curious, who actually made the report? Was it government or independent? Where can the report be found? This is regarding the COVID subcommittee vaccine mandate report. Just the way that this was handled is a 2-year report. And I'm going to answer that in a second. A1 Custom Car Care first, though, coming up just a couple days away from the Saturday show. Diesel fuel additives. You and Dustin are going to be talking about that.
That is correct. 'Tis the season.
And Christmas gift ideas for car lovers in your life.
Yep.
Yeah, so see, it's so much more than just what's a anti-lock brake system good for. Sometimes, there are things in the world of automotive repair and maintenance that don't really make sense to the average person, and so the show is a great marriage of the two, and you get that sort of thing. I know there have been a lot of those questions that I've asked Dustin before, like, does it really matter where you buy your gas from? And you see those things where add this in with your fuel and it's going to clean your fuel injectors. Like, really? Is that really, the case? And it's a great place to get that information. And of course, anytime you're in A1 Custom Car Care, ask those questions when you're in for routine maintenance or something else. They'll be more than happy to handle that for you. But that show, diesel fuel additives, Christmas gift ideas for car lovers, I'm sure much more as well. That will be coming up on Saturday, 10 a.m. And any of those shows you missed, of course, the on-demand section at ksgf.com. So this report that came out that showed, among other things, the vaccine mandates did not work. The government discredited itself by coordinating to discredit people who disagreed with the narrative. The masks didn't do any good. The 6 feet apart, all of that stuff was made up. Some of this is information that we know. And in fact, in the report being comprehensive and a 2-year-long report, or 2 years worth of gathering of information, much of what is in there is information that people like Fauci himself he's already admitted this, but it's putting it in a report form. And so it was the committee. It was a committee that did it, a government committee on the coronavirus pandemic. But they utilized, among others, the Cochrane, I believe it's how it's pronounced, and that is a global independent network of researchers, professionals. So what you had is the government committee, which was made up of elected officials, that for much of the research project, if you will, the investigation, they utilized independent researchers, and so that was part of it. But it's a good question because it's like, well, okay, just because Republicans are running the committee, that doesn't mean it's going to be right? This is where the report itself is important. And I could tell you it's 520 pages long. Much of that is index stuff and citing sources and so forth. But it's providing the evidence. You see that in the report. It is quoting email exchanges back and forth that were discovered. And so it's not simply, well, this is what we believe because this expert told us so, but it is a breakdown of the evidence that shows, all right, this is the conclusion here, and this is how we have come to this conclusion. And that is what is important, because too often what happens with these government officials is they just tell you because we're experts. And this, of course, is part of the problem. And don't question us. We don't have to provide you information or evidence. I'm an expert. I have a degree in this. I've been honored in this capacity. And this report instead, again, says don't just trust because here is the evidence that we discovered in the investigation and how it is that we came to the conclusion. We'll get that. Have you found that report?
Yeah, it's at ksgf.com under
yeah.
your must-read headlines for today.
Yeah, and the beginning of it has sort of key findings, and there are a lot of them. So if you think, I don't want to sit through a 520-page report, but I am kind of interested in some of this. It gives you in the opening a listing Well, actually, here, let me. There's two different. Maybe we can get this up in addition to the report because I'm not sure if you have this from the oversight.house.gov, and it has a breakdown of these are our findings, and then of course in the report it has all the information about the findings, but it just lists, it's one thing after another. Social distancing, it notes the 6 feet apart social distancing recommendation, which shut down schools and small businesses across the country, was arbitrary and not based on science. During closed-door testimony, Fauci testified that the guidance, quote, sort of just appeared. Mask mandates, lockdowns, New York pandemic failures, travel restrictions, COVID-19 misinformation, natural immunity. Public health officials engaged in a coordinated effort to ignore natural immunity, which is acquired through previous COVID-19 infections when developed vaccine guidance and mandates. So that initial page, which we'll get up as well, has a very simple breakdown of the areas and the conclusions, and then the report itself provides the evidence for the conclusions. Regarding the accountability factor, and that no one will be held accountable here, I had referenced the fact that even locally, much of the disinformation was used by local officials to take away people's livelihoods by shutting down their businesses. People lost jobs. People lost their businesses. But also, and many of you texted in, the number of people who lost their lives because you had the refusal to utilize different remedies, if you will. Ivermectin, of course, became this huge flashpoint in which people who utilized it found that their symptoms greatly reduced. And there were even people in the medical community who had noted that there were people on death's doorstep, and then within 24 hours of something like ivermectin, that turned around. But because of a coordinated effort, once again, to spread disinformation, ivermectin was something that the experts said was not only awful and horrible, but they mocked people, demonized people who wanted to utilize it as people trying to take horse tranquilizers and go into a veterinarian. And you think about the darkness of that when you have somebody that is in ICU in which the doctors are saying, we don't think there's anything we can do. And so there's nothing to be done, they say. Well, what about this ivermectin? Nope. They're going to die anyway. Nope. Not going to try it. Won't do it because Fauci said we can't do it. Because the experts say that it's horse dewormer. And, Joe Rogan talked about it, so we're not going to do it. And the fact that people lost their lives because of that arrogance. So people did die because of the disinformation campaigns and the mocking of people who you think about the different approach. You had Donald Trump as president, and he signed into legislation, or I guess it was an executive order, that allowed for experimental drugs to be used on people if they were at death's door. This was something that was a couple years into the administration, and you hear these horror stories of people, they're going to die. And we're working on this drug, and we think that it'll work. Well, then give it to me, or give it to my wife or my daughter or my father, because you're telling me that he is or they're gonna die anyway. Well, nope, government says we can't because it hasn't been approved by the FDA. And Trump signed off saying that is no longer going to be the case. That these experimental drugs, or drugs that haven't been approved yet but are still being tested, whatever the classification is, if somebody is going to die anyhow, use the drug. That versus where we ended up, in which people were dying, and ivermectin, something that had been approved for off-label use, was showing that with some people it helped, and some of these hospitals were run by CEOs that would rather have seen those people die, and did see those people die, than acknowledge that maybe they didn't know everything. And I think we do. We forget about those instances and the needless deaths that were caused by people who accused you of needlessly killing people if you didn't wear a mask, which, of course, turned out not to be true. Coming up, the trust in the FBI has plummeted to the lowest number this century. Some interesting numbers there that I want to share. And then an effort to sort of almost casually try and rehabilitate the reputation of the Obamas post the election, and Nancy Pelosi and some of these others as well.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 57. Tonight, clear with a low around 20. For your Thursday, sunny with a high near 32. And on Friday, sunny skies with a high near 44.
Did you have a good Thanksgiving? Did you crack open a cold one just because, hey, you were having a great time, or maybe it was a horrible time? You needed to sneak out to the garage and crack one open. It was one of my favorite episodes of the original Roseanne, where the Roseanne's mother, Beverly, she realized she was an alcoholic and really embraced sobriety, and they were going to watch, I think it was the Super Bowl, and she was over, so they couldn't drink around her, and then they all sneak out to the garage and get just blasted while they're out there. And sometimes that's a great place to keep the beer. Maybe it's just a sip or two just for the enjoyment. Point being, keep your eyes open and give it a try. If you haven't yet, Bradford Light, Kansas Territory Brewing Company. You can get it in area price cutters and Macadoodles in the Springfield market now. And it's 3.8%, so it's great, easy drinking. It's a good go-to for you to try out. So when you're next at one of those businesses, Macadoodles or Price Cutter, and you see it, you may want to give her a try. CNN did a not really deep dive, but they did an evaluation of polling regarding the trust in the FBI. And It may come as no surprise. Republicans in particular have lost a great amount of trust in the FBI, while Democrats seem to really like the fact that the FBI goes after their political opposition. This is a breakdown on CNN of those numbers.
How do you gauge, and how have the views of the American public evolved or changed or not over the years?
Yeah, look, I think Patel has real reason to believe that Americans would go along with changes that he might potentially make at the FBI, and there's a reason why Donald Trump feels like he can make this change. It's because if you look here, FBI is doing an excellent or good job. Look at this time trend line. You go back to 2014, right? It was 59% of Americans, then 57% in 2019, 50% in 2022. Look at where we are today. My goodness gracious, just 41% of Americans think the FBI is doing an excellent or good job. That is by far the lowest number this century. The bottom line is, during the Trump administration, obviously there were the investigations into Donald Trump. You saw a little bit of drop then, and then post January 6th, look at that drop, 50%, now 41%. My goodness gracious, Kate Baldwin.
I think one thing about this, hard to gauge, right? I'll call it a chicken or an egg kind of question. Is the view declining because is it from bottom up or top down? Is it because people are talking trash about the FBI more and more, or because Americans' views of distrust of the agency are growing? It's something it's hard, that is hard to know. But
no, that's not hard to nail. You can love the attempt to salvage the reputation of the FBI here. Well, is this just because people are trashing on the FBI? It's just really hard to figure out why. This is not very difficult to figure out. We've learned things about the way that the FBI behaves, well, since Donald Trump was first running for president. From a macro view, they tried to, they attempted a coup. Acknowledging that they were leaking information to the media in order to allow Congress, the Democrats, to have justification for opening up an investigation based off this false premise that Russia was coordinating with the Trump campaign. There was an attempt to derail, and the FBI was a great portion of it, the Trump campaign. Once he got elected, there was an attempt to overthrow the Trump presidency. In Comey's own handwritten notes from a meeting prior to the election in 2016, he was in the room with Obama, I forget if Biden was there or if he was updated later. Susan Rice was in there, a number of others, in which they were briefed that the Hillary Clinton campaign was going to make up an allegation that Donald Trump was coordinating with the Russians. They were trying to help him get elected, and that they were going to pay for a dossier to be made up in order to use it as justification. So, we know this. This isn't anything in dispute. Comey's own handwritten notes from that meeting. That's how it is that we learn this. Of course, at some point, and this is the fascinating unknown, that if I could pick one unknown to actually know in all of this, it would probably be this. At some point, they decided, oh, hey, well, we can use this too. Up to and including spying on the Trump campaign, again, falsely accusing Trump of coordinating with the Russians and pretending as if we thought that this dossier was real, when we know that they knew it was paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. It was an attorney for the FBI who would be found guilty, I think he pled guilty, to falsifying evidence before a FISA court in order to be able to spy on the Trump campaign. The messages, Peter Strzok and his side piece there at the FBI, in which they're talking back and forth about nailing Trump, figuring out a way to get him, while at the same time figuring out a way to protect Hillary Clinton. The faking of the down in Florida, the envelopes with top secret stamped on it, which we would learn was planted by the FBI. I mean, you can go down the list. Not to mention the acknowledgement in court cases against January 6ers that they had embedded themselves in the January 6 riots, but claim that there were too many of them to know exactly how many. I mean, these are just a few examples. That's why Americans do not trust the FBI. That's why the reputation of the FBI has been vastly diminished. This assertion that it's really hard to figure out whether it's because the FBI's done anything, or is this more about, Trump world trashing on the FBI, and because of that, people just think that they shouldn't trust them. It's very clear why trust in the FBI is at the lowest point this century. Now, it isn't when it comes to the Democrats, however.
How do you gauge, and how have the views of the American public evolved or changed or not over the years?
Yeah. Actually, I want to take a break here because that backed up a little bit further than I wanted. But I'm going to play. This may come as a surprise to you. Democrats think very highly of the FBI, according to the numbers. That coming up. I'm Nick Reed. Before the traffic update, CNN's Harry Enton breaking down the diminished trust the American people have with the FBI. It's for 2014, 59%, 2019, 57%, 2022, 50%, and then 2024, 41%, which coordinates along with the revelations over the years of all the ways that the FBI corrupted itself trying to go after Trump. These two things they run in line with one another. But when it comes to, and it's even more clear when it comes to the trust that Republican voters have versus Democrat voters have.
Among Republicans, is the FBI doing an excellent or good job? This is where you really see the drop-off. You go back to 2014, I'm going to come to your side of the screen, it's 62%. 2019, look at that, 46%. 2022, 29%. Now we're tied for the lowest point at this century among Republicans at 26%. That is a drop of more than half since 2014. So again, you saw some of that drop during the Trump administration. Obviously he replaced James Comey, and then you see it really after January 6th, 29%. And now 26%. That is a tremendous, tremendous drop-off among Republicans.
Let's remember that number, and then let's talk about Democrats.
Yeah, remember this number and remember this trend line, this downward trend line. Among Democrats, it's just not the same story at all. All right? Among Democrats, it was 54% in 2014. Then you saw that number shoot up to 66% in 2019. Then look at this, 79% in 2022. We have seen some drop off since then to 67%, but that is still significantly higher than it was in 2014 at 54%. The bottom line is this. If Republicans have become much less trusting of the FBI, Democrats have become more trusting, though the number who trust it now, who think it's doing an excellent or good job, is lower than it was 2 years ago. And that is why we have the lowest percentage this century of Americans overall who believe the FBI is doing an excellent or good job.
Now, it isn't actually trust that the Democrats have in the FBI. It's just a love that they have. The fact that over the same period of time in which the FBI has been exposed, using their power in a corrupt manner in order to get Donald Trump, that Democrats love them more. And it's not in the problems within the FBI are not in dispute. There's no dispute that an attorney for the FBI falsified evidence to get a FISA warrant in order to spy on the Trump campaign. He pled guilty to it. It's not in dispute that Comey and others within the FBI knew that the dossier was fake. We didn't even talk about the fact that they covered up the Hunter Biden laptop reality in the run-up to the 2020 election. None of that's in dispute. So it isn't a question as to whether or not the FBI has broken the law, the FBI has acted in a corrupt manner, the FBI has lied to the American people. During that entire period of time, they pretended to think that the Russian dossier was real when we know that they knew it wasn't. None of that's in dispute. It is a culturally corrupt institution that uses its power to try and kill off any sort of political opposition. The fact that Republicans see that as a reason to distrust the institution makes total sense and is warranted. That should be the reaction to any government institution behaving in that manner. It also tells us a lot about the culture of the Democrat Party and its voters today, that there was a spike in respect and love for the FBI as those things were exposed. That says as much, if not more, about those Democrat voters than it does the FBI itself.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Color 10, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll have sunny skies with a high near 57. Tonight, clear with a low around 20. For your Thursday, sunny with a high near 32. And on Friday, sunny with a high near 44.
All right, KSGF.com. A couple of things here that want to update you on. One, the Christmas event things, right? That are
Christmas
up
in
there.
the Ozark.
Yeah.
We do these lists, I don't know, a couple times a year. And so this one is mainly for different light displays across the Ozarks, places to see Santa, Christmas parades, basically everything Christmas. And it is sponsored this year by Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. So you can just go to KSGF.com. It's in the homepage slider, and then we add different events just kind of throughout the rest of the month.
Also, coming up 10 a.m. this Friday, Local for Less Ozarks, Big Whiskeys. For $25, you can get a $50 gift certificate. So kind of a 2-for-1 deal. That will be, once again, 10 a.m. on Friday. Friday is going to be a busy day because we are doing our holiday helpers, where throughout the day we're going to check in with some area businesses that can be very helpful to you on the holidays. And in the past, this is an evolution. In the past, we've focused on gift ideas, and while gift ideas are still something that are important, there are other things like, if you got to ship gifts, what's the best way to do it? I have a go-to place, and that's actually one of the holiday helpers this year that we're going to be visiting. And I go to them because I had to ship something that was heavy but not real big, and so there was a period of time where they ship it based off weight. No, now we ship by box size, so it's very confusing to me. And so that's when I first found Rapid Ship Republic on 60 next to Domino's there, and that's just my absolute go-to. So shipping is a big thing around Christmas time. Also, if you have people in town visiting, and it's after Christmas, everyone's sitting around, you're like, gosh, kind of want to get out of the house, what things to do. So we're expanding beyond the gift ideas, and we're going to be visiting with some that you're familiar with, some new ones. Ming Auto Beauty Center, I mentioned Rapid Ship Republic. Corwin Automotive of Springfield is going to be providing the transportation. Aviary Cafe, Big Shots Golf, and Foreman Mechanical is the sponsor of this. I say once again this year, but it's again evolved from Nick's Favorite Things to Holiday Helpers. And so we're going to be doing that all day Friday. We'll be coming to you Facebook Live as well as breaking in on the air. And we're going to have happy hour also on Friday. I swear this is always the busiest Friday of the year, this first Friday. And because we'll have Heroes Breakfast as well.
Yeah.
So we've got the Heroes Breakfast. We've got
I gotta make those coupons.
Yeah, we've got the Holiday Helpers. We're going to have our happy hour at Retro Metro 4 to 6. It's going to be a very busy day. And we do have Santa's Angels underway as well. And we'll talk in more detail on that again. But they've spent a lot of time doing informational stuff. This is just a busy week with a lot of different things going on. So I wanted to make sure to hit all of that. Coming up, I want to play some audio, and this is a Democrat strategist who was on News Nation, and we're beginning to hear some of these people that are presented as being credible individuals, but they may not be individuals that you know. They're not these political people necessarily, but it's, this is somebody, for example, who's with the Democratic National Finance Committee. And she was on News Nation explaining that, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, they actually weren't necessarily behind Kamala Harris after all. All that campaigning they did, the telling black men that they were misogynistic if they didn't support Kamala Harris, that, all of that wasn't real. I don't think that's a massive surprise to us, but the reason behind this is what I think is very telling. So I'm going to play the audio, and we'll talk about it coming up. Pyramid Roofing Company, talk at text line 447 KSGF. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I am Nick Reed. Welcome to the show. Pyramid Roofing Company, talk at text line 447 KSGF. Any home loan needs that you may have, you may need, iwantagreathomeloan.com. That is your go-to place. Refinancing, should you, shouldn't you? And even as a second option, it's one of the things that I encourage you to do. Perhaps you are comfortable with your financial institution, you've been there forever, and you think, well, they're going to get me the best deal possible. Well, maybe they're going to get you the best deal possible for them. But perhaps with the folks at iwantagreathomeloan.com, they're going to be able to find something else. Who knows? It does not cost you anything to find out. So I definitely, again, recommend, even though you have in front of you, here's what we can do for you from your financial institution. Also go to iwantagreathomeloan.com and they can see what they can do for you as well. Democrat strategist reveals what Obama and Pelosi really think of Kamala Harris. In a candid interview with News Nation's Natasha Zoves earlier this week, Lindy Lee, who is a Democrat strategist and Democrat National Finance Committee member, shed light on key figures in the Democrat Party, including Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi.
Do you agree that Obama and Pelosi did not want Harris?
I know they didn't. It's not, I have a lot of friends in Obama world, and actually I'm friends with Speaker Pelosi, and I spoke with her before I actually went on air to encourage President Biden to step aside. And I touched base with her camp before I did that.
And what did she tell you?
It's not a matter of conjecture for me. I know they didn't.
I appreciate that. What did she tell you at that time?
Well, she said it was fine that I went on air to encourage President Biden to step down. It was July 21st when I went on Fox News Sunday, and I said it was time for him to step down and pass the mantle to the next generation. It was necessary. It became clear that he's no longer able to effectively litigate the case against President Biden, against Trump. So, Obama and Pelosi were both hoping for a primary instead of a coronation, so to speak.
Who do you think they were hoping for?
I don't think Pelosi was hoping for anyone in particular, or not that I know of. I do know that Obama was carefully vetting Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. I know there were other names on his list. I'm not saying that Kamala Harris was necessarily at the top of the list, but he was definitely considering other candidates. I don't think she was ruled out. I just think that everyone is, a lot of people, the chieftains of the party, were hoping for a lightning round, a lightning primary. And President Biden essentially preempted that by issuing his endorsement 30 minutes after he dropped out. I don't think anyone saw that coming. We did not see that coming. I think a lot of people anticipated that he might have stepped aside, but no one anticipated the twofer that we got that day.
All right. Now, her assertions here, I believe, could very well be based in fact. I don't believe necessarily that this is disinformation that we have become accustomed to with many of these folks. And it was speculated early on, there were sort of whispers out there that Biden endorsed Kamala almost as a middle finger to the Democrat Party because he was angry that they overthrew his election in the primaries and caucuses that they were attempting to, and that they eventually, according to his own, one of his top campaign people said that, yeah, once they got the donors to cut off the funding, we had no choice. I mean, they overthrew the election. And that Biden was severely, severely ticked off. And so he thought, oh, fine, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to endorse Kamala Harris and stick them with her, knowing that she would be a horrible candidate. Now, you may say, well, why would he think that? Let's not forget, his campaign was subject to calls for him to replace Kamala Harris. So here Biden has for months, the Biden campaign, been subjected to, you need to drop Kamala. Kamala is a weight on the campaign. Kamala is more unpopular than you are. You need to get rid of her. So the very first thing he does post agreeing to be overthrown is to say, oh yeah, I'm picking her. She's the one that needs to run. So that it just, given that he knew they wanted her off that ticket to begin with, that's a pretty big middle finger. It also, I think, could very well be true, what Lindy Lee is saying here, that Obama never wanted her, didn't like her to be on the ticket, that he hoped for somebody like Mark Kelly, that he had a list of other people. She said, I'm not saying that she wasn't on the list necessarily, but she certainly wasn't his top choice. And I believe that that's probably true as well. Because Obama knew, I mean, they all knew that she was a horrifically weak candidate. Largely because she had absolutely no leadership skills and she wasn't likable. So, of course, if you're making a list, you're sitting there writing out on a napkin the names of people. Obviously, she's got to be on there. She's, the current vice president. She would be the one that, in all likelihood, historically would be running anyhow after Biden would no longer be president of the United States. And so, okay, but all right, who do we think can really win here? So I believe that's probably true as well. To me, what's interesting is that these people are being given permission to go out there and start talking about it. Specifically with Obama, and giving specific names of individuals, not just this sort of vague, well, I think that he may have liked other people, but by providing specific names like Mark Kelly, you're really solidifying that that this is somebody in the know. Because she knows the specific people that Obama preferred. After the election loss, one of the conversations that was occurring, it wasn't the focus, but just as all the fallouts and the chips are falling, is that there was a tremendous amount of concern within the Obama circle, including the Obamas themselves, that they had screwed themselves over royally in terms of credibility by not only endorsing Kamala, because I think the average person understands that, well, of course they're going to go out there, of course they're going to endorse her, of course they're going to campaign for her whether they like her or not. But the fact that he just, when he went out there and told black people, black men in particular, that you're misogynistic if you don't support her. And then the massive loss that occurred subsequent to that, it was something that some described as making the Obamas as relevant or irrelevant in the large scheme of things as the Clintons are. And while the Clintons are still around, they're seen as they don't really move the needle much. Maybe fundraise here, fundraise there, but the public sway that they have is irrelevant. And it was very concerning to the Obama circle that they had done that to themselves. Because you look at it, listen. Obama picked Hillary to run over Biden. We saw how that went. He wasn't, he very reluctantly would end up supporting Biden, but it was clear that he was reluctant in that. He comes out and endorses Kamala, though while he was reluctant in it, it was yet another loss. And then the added injury of the insult to black men in this country for not supporting her and that they were misogynistic is something that his street cred, they fear, is totally eliminated. So I think that the Democrats right now are looking at, if Obama is gone, we don't have anyone to go out there that's popular with the American people right now. No one. And I suspect what's happening here is that some of these insiders, like Lindy Lee of the Democratic National Finance Committee, are going out there saying, in reality, Obama wasn't a supporter of her. Sure, she was on the list, but he liked this person better. He liked that person better. And it's done in order to try and rehabilitate his reputation to the degree that he's relevant once again in the Democrat Party. Springfield's Talk, and America overall. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. It is so remarkable to see the payoff that is already occurring when it comes to international peace, because Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. What a difference it makes. An absolute undeniable difference. Hamas and Iran recognizing that they no longer have an ally in the White House, or they do, but not for much longer. There's a report from the New York Times noting that as soon as Trump won, Iran halted they're like, all right, it's stop time on this thing. Simply because he was elected. Because they know. Zelensky changing his tune, opening the door to peace talks with Russia. This is because Donald Trump is elected president. You think about the implications of your vote, my vote. I mean, you know it. But when you recognize that that vote is already resulting in these situations. So we've got that coming up in the next hour. President Trump says all hell to pay if Hamas doesn't release hostages before he takes office. Isn't it really? It truly is. America's coming back.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, not even. I mean, the results are already producing themselves, but we think about, okay, what does that mean for America to be back? What does that mean? And I think because so many average Americans have been devastated just economically, when it comes to crime, when it comes to the drugs that the administration has allowed to come across the border, when it comes to human trafficking, it just we look at ourselves, and I think most reasonable Americans are a little bit embarrassed. And I know that Democrats used to say, "Oh, it's so embarrassing the things that Trump says." Well, what embarrasses me is that we are the only country in the world that openly invites human traffickers into our country. That we are the number one draw for selling children into sex slavery in this world. That we are it. By far, we are the number one country, the United States of America. And that's been done in just a few years. That we can't, in some parts of our country, count votes in a 12-hour period. In fact, it was just yesterday out in California they finished counting votes in one of the races in which, the longer they draw it out, the closer it becomes, then the Democrat wins, and the Democrat won, flipped it. That we have criminals in this country. Some are native-born American. Others are illegal immigrants that openly mock our ability to do anything about them. Increasingly, these individuals that get arrested for murder or attacking police officers openly smirk as they're arrested and say, "I'll be out in no time." This is becoming an increasingly regular occurrence in this country that they openly express, "I'm going to be out on the street in 24 hours. That we had a media in this country pretending as if Joe Biden was perfectly fine cognitively. I mean, to me as an American, these things that the world's, that's embarrassing. Afghanistan, the disastrous withdrawal itself, but then the administration pretending as if it was the most remarkable military feat ever. That's embarrassing. When it was discovered Lloyd Austin had been missing for, a couple of weeks, and no one knew where he was, including the White House, apparently. Cocaine found in the White House, topless transgenders running around on the White House lawn with kids. I mean, these are just some of the things off the top of my head. And then Iran. Lifting sanctions on Iran so that they could fund Hamas, which would lead to October 7th. And then once even Iran itself acknowledged that, yeah, we did this, Biden would then lift more sanctions, making sure that they had more money, taking the Houthis off the list of terrorist organizations. I mean, just that you think about all of it, letting a spy balloon fly over our country, acting like, well, we couldn't shoot it down over the forest, making up these absurd. I remember during that period of time, I thought about, we had a happy hour at Retro Metro while all that was going on. And I just remember talking about, it was such a shift in feeling for a lot of people, including myself, that at that very moment, we knew this thing was flying over. And people were filming it with their phones. There it is. Why are we doing nothing about this? And then waiting until it was offshore before we shot it down, allowing it to transmit in real time all of that information. I mean, I have to stop because I keep saying this is just the stuff off the top of my head, and then I think of other things. It has been one embarrassment after another. And so the attitude and the approach, I think, is so much more, or it's just as important as the results when we talk about America's back. And because of the focus on the economy and the border itself, many of us think of the results of America is back in being, okay, the economy, it may take a while, but we're going to get things back on track. We're going to secure that border. But I think I actually forgot just the attitude of America is back. And the fact that we have a president of the United States, instead of repeating the talking points of Hamas, is saying, you release those hostages before I'm sworn in. If not, there will be hell to pay, unlike any hell that has ever been paid by anyone since the foundation of the United States of America. And that makes me think, yes, that's how you deal with evil. The old sheriff is back in town. And the way that many foreign leaders, allies, and enemies are behaving demonstrates that they know that too. It's amazing what happens when you take a nation and you shift it from total void of leadership to, relatively speaking, across this globe, the pinnacle of leadership. Bam, 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 things start falling into place. And it doesn't mean that all of a sudden world peace is going to break out and that there aren't going to be any problems or obstacles, but it is clearly paying off already. And it's profound and even sad to me that people who claim, especially what was once upon a time called the bleeding heart liberal, people who, they cared so much about this and, peace in the middle, we got to have this and that. And then the fact that here Trump is, it's just already. I tell you, those Abraham Accords, if those things can pick back up, that people on the left would not look at that and say, wow, that's kind of what we claim we wanted all along. And he's doing it. Maybe we ought to cut the guy some slack. Maybe he's not a Nazi. That their hatred overrides, you learn they lead by hate. And that hate is their ultimate master. Because if they have to choose between hate and what they claim that they really support and peace in the Middle East and so forth, that they toss that aside in order to bow to the master of hate. Traffic in mere moments right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll have sunny skies with a high near 57. Tonight clear with a low around 20. For your Thursday, sunny with a high near 32. And on Friday, sunny skies with a high near 44.
All right, coming up, Benjamin Netanyahu responds to Trump's threat to Hamas about hell to pay if they don't release the hostages by the time he is sworn in, and also a New York Times piece highlighting that Iran has halted its attacks on Israel following Donald Trump's victory. President-elect Trump says there will be all hell to pay if Hamas does not release hostages by the time before or by the time he begins his second term. Again, much different approach than using the talking points of Hamas, threatening to obliterate them if they don't comply. Quote, everyone, did you say something?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little bit stronger than don't.
Yeah, don't. Hey, guys, if you don't mind, don't do that. Well, that just seemed to work so well in every instance. It was almost this trigger word in which it's like, oh, no, he said don't. Now we know they're going to do it.
Right, yeah, it's real strong response.
Trump said everybody talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East, but it's all talk, no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date I proudly assume office of the President of the United States, there will be, this is all caps, all hell to pay in the Middle East. And for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity, Benjamin Netanyahu responding to that message from Donald Trump.
I want to thank President Trump for his strong statement yesterday about the need for Hamas to release the hostages, the responsibility of Hamas. And this adds another force to our continuing effort to release all the hostages. Thank you, President Trump.
Now, that is what it sounds like whenever an ally demonstrates it is actually an ally. For all the talk from Joe Biden that there has never been a president that's more pro-Israel and more pro-Jewish than him, what you just heard from Benjamin Netanyahu is a response from a president that demonstrates a true ally of Israel. Iran, for their part, reportedly halted an attack on Israel following President-elect Donald Trump's sweeping victory over Kamala Harris in November. A recent report from the New York Times highlighted that Iran has struck a more conciliatory tone since the November election, which included halting a retaliatory attack on the Jewish state. Writing in mid-November, Iran dispatched a top official to Beirut to urge Hezbollah to accept a ceasefire with Israel. Around the same time, Iran's UN ambassador met with Elon Musk, an overture to President-elect Donald Trump's inner circle. And on Friday, it will hold talks in Geneva with European countries on a range of issues, including its nuclear program. All this recent diplomacy marks a sharp change in tone from last October, when Iran was preparing to launch a large retaliatory attack on Israel, with a deputy commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps warning, quote, "We have never left an aggression unanswered in 40 years. Well, it looks like they may for the first time. And Trump isn't even president yet. It is just beyond me. I think back to the obvious political hacks that have been given top jobs in the military, writing those op-ed pieces about how Kamala Harris has to be president of the United States. Donald Trump is unpredictable and a danger. Can you imagine how different all of this would look if Kamala Harris had been elected? Do we think that Iran would all of a sudden be saying, whoa, maybe we can work something out here? If Kamala had been elected president, do you think Iran would have gone to Hezbollah and said, cut it out for right now? Do you think that Iran would have stopped what that was already a planned retaliatory attack against Israel if Kamala Harris had been elected president? Of course not. The level of discrediting that so many of these experts and people in the thing about the military, former, current military, people that come out and say Donald Trump is a danger to the world and that Kamala Harris is the one that we need to be commander-in-chief. I'm thinking to myself, being non-military, didn't you kind of sort of swear an oath? You would think that politics would be the furthest thing from your mind and your number one priority. Number one priority would be in the context of, do we have to have war or can we have peace, that, hey, whatever is safest for America is the ultimate desired outcome here. And recognizing what Trump had already done with North Korea, with Iran, with the Abraham Accords, the results that we had already seen, that people in the military would be able to put aside politics, or retired military or current, would put aside politics and instead have America's safety as first. And the fact that so many of them didn't. Daily Caller reporting that the Ukrainian President Zelensky has suggested a growing interest in peace talks with Russia in recent interviews and press conferences, according to the Wall Street Journal. Zelensky floating a deal that would give Ukraine membership in NATO in exchange for ceding Russian-occupied territory, according to the Wall Street Journal. Russian forces have rapidly increased their foothold in Ukrainian territory in recent months as Ukraine struggles with manpower, making gains not seen since the early days of the war in 2022. Zelensky saying at a press conference Sunday, according to the Wall Street Journal, if we'll have a frozen conflict without any strong position for Ukraine, so Putin will come in 2 or 3 or 5 years, he will come back and destroy us totally or try to destroy us, noting that, this is his position of wanting to be an official member of NATO. The differences are already being made. The results are already trending in a more positive direction. And I just got to reiterate, it becomes clear that so many of these people who are put in positions, whether it's elected or appointed, in which, among other things, and sometimes above all, their job is supposed to be the security of the United States, which oftentimes means a more secure world, that they clearly, that does not really ultimately matter to them. It makes no difference to them whatsoever. Because if it did, even at 2020, Trump is no longer in office, they would have continued doing what it was that he was doing. They would have recognized the advancements of peace, and so, okay, they wouldn't even have to give him credit for it. They could have taken credit for it. Once upon a time, it seemed like a conspiracy theory to point to these people, many of which have financial interest in the military industrial complex. But it's hard to believe that that's not true when you see them actively come out against someone whose policies have resulted in peace. I think it's a real wake-up call for a lot of people. At least it should be. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, all of your home buying needs, your home selling needs. Busy time of the year as a lot of folks want to get all of that taken care of before the end of the year. I think there's some tax implications in there perhaps, but many times it's just a mindset. New year, new home, downsizing, upsizing, and maybe you just have questions about it. You really start thinking about it. That can be overwhelming. It's so easy to put something like that off because of, the thought, well, we're going to have to do all these upgrades. Maybe you don't have to do the upgrades that you think. And there may be some that you need to do that you did not think of. That's where she comes in handy. And trust me, this isn't a situation where you contact her and like, hey, could you come by and check out my house? We've got some questions. And she's like, well, you need to sign this contract first. That's not how she operates. Utilize her and her expertise so that you can make the best decision for you when it comes to buying a home or selling a home. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty.
Springfield Stock 1041, your first alert forecast from Colorton, Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll have sunny skies with a high near 57, tonight clear with a low around 20. For your Thursday, sunny with a high near 32, and on Friday, sunny skies with a high near 44.
So the latest reporting is that Ron DeSantis is eyed to replace Hegseth as defense secretary in major cabinet shakeup report. President-elect Donald Trump, this is from the Gateway Pundit, reportedly considering replacing his embattled pick for Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, with Florida Governor DeSantis, according to sources cited by the Wall Street Journal. This follows Trump and DeSantis' attendance at a memorial for fallen law enforcement officers on Tuesday in Florida, according to CBS News. CBS News senior White House Ed O'Keefe echoed the reporting, stating that two sources familiar with the transition tell CBS News's Aaron Navarro and me that President-elect Trump is considering naming DeSantis as his pick for defense secretary who would replace embattled Fox News host Pete Hegseth. Hegseth has faced allegations of past sexual and workplace misconduct, which has come to light in recent news reports. Now, first off, I don't believe that this means that any of this is actually happening. It doesn't mean that it's not also. Now, I've got a number of different thoughts and feelings on this. One, this could be Donald Trump sending a signal that, oh, you think that you hate this Hegseth guy? Who do you hate just as much as me? Or who's second in line? It's Ron DeSantis. I'll put him in charge. Aside from just their hatred of Governor DeSantis, there's one thing that even Democrats recognize when it comes to DeSantis, and that is he knows how to run stuff. This has been demonstrated with frequency when it comes to dealing with hurricane recovery relief. They may not like him politically, they may not agree with him ideologically, but they know that if this guy is in charge of something, he gets it done. Now, they don't like Hegseth because, Hegseth is somebody that's not part of the establishment and not part of the swamp, and they don't like him. But I could see Trump recognizing that with Hegseth, there are unknowns. How effective would he actually be? He's not ever really run any institution that large before. And so while, again, ideologically they don't like him, it is still an open question as to how effective he would be. There really isn't much of a question in terms of how effective would Ron DeSantis be at running this sort of institution, because he's very effective and very good. And so this could be a scenario in which Donald Trump is having this leaked out in order to send the message, oh, you think you don't like my pick now? I don't like the idea, especially at this point, of him Hegseth either dropping out or Trump asking him to drop out, because this, even more than the Matt Gaetz situation, is the old playbook. We don't like someone for political reasons, and so we're going to have a bunch of anonymous sources claiming that he did this, he did that, and it's just right back to Kavanaugh. It's right back to, a listing of Republicans. It's always Republicans that are recipients of this. And what they rely on is having people like Lindsey Graham and some of these other Republicans are like, well, these reports are awfully troubling. I don't know. We're really going to have to look at this. It's like, how many times do you have to be puppets of these people? Given the nature of the accusations, my preference is hell or high water, Trump makes this happen. Now, Gaetz, I believe, is a little bit different, because Gaetz was somebody who he had political adversaries even within the Republican Party, and some of the accusations that came up against him, they've been around for a while. Now, in my opinion, they've been clearly disproven. But it was part of the Matt Gaetz package that existed already. With Hegseth, we're dealing with a situation in which here's a guy that doesn't have political enemies. He's not a politician. Of course, people on the left don't like him because he's on Fox News. But we're going back to that. Here's an individual that doesn't have the political background, and they bring out the old anonymous sources claim he did this, anonymous, and then responding to it, even though not only is there not evidence, but many of the accusations were completely disproven. And this is, to me, a real potentially defining moment as to whether or not we're going to allow the people that play this old song to once again have control over whether or not the incoming president of the United States gets to pick the people that he wants to pick in order to be in these positions. I think part of it for me is this is so old. It is so redundant. I'm not talking about accusations against him, but the whole, oh, well, we've got somebody who says he sexually harassed this person or someone that he did, and much of this is coming from members of Congress who preside over a slush fund that has paid millions of dollars of hush money to staffers who have been sexually harassed. It is, I'm telling you, we have a guy sitting in the Oval Office today who, not anonymously, his own daughter wrote in her diary that dad was crawling into the shower with her at an inappropriate age. His own daughter is the source of that information. And no one disputes it. In fact, the Biden administration, the government, used her diary in a case against someone who, they went after for stealing the diary. And his daughter had testified in the case. So there's no disputing that it's her diary. This was a diary that she was writing in rehab. It was part of her therapy, in which she's trying to define why it is that she has addiction problems, and much of it centered around sexual abuse, and in it she wrote about her dad taking showers with her. That would be Joe Biden. At an inappropriate age. Now, what is that age? I suppose everyone starts showering at different times, but, you think, well, parents take baths with their toddlers. These weren't baths. These were showers. This was a girl who was old enough to be taking showers. And we're told that's perfectly fine. But Pete Head said he was dancing with strippers somewhere. And, are you serious? Oh, now they're trying to say, well, sometimes he drank too much. Okay. Once again, he'll never fit in Washington with that. Did you hear Claire McCaskill on him? Oh, my gosh. I have to play Claire McCaskill coming up next. She is so at home in MSNBC. This woman, I cannot believe, as a state, we had this woman in the U.S. Senate. She is one of the stupidest human beings. She really is. I think that she might be as stupid as Kamala Harris. She speaks better than Kamala does. Without question. She definitely does a much better job of delivering her messaging. But the basis for many of her arguments, that she is either stupid or she's so lazy she can't come up with better arguments than she does. And it may be some of that as well. I don't know. But I got to play for you her explanation as to why Hegseth would be such a horrible pick. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. The Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, we only have a few more warm days left ahead of us. So if you do plan on going out this year decorating your house with Christmas lights, now is the time to do it. And if you plan on hanging lights around the eaves or the gutters or just anywhere on your roof and you notice issues, whether it be loose shingles or storm damage from storms earlier this year, go ahead and call Josh with the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, the Pyramid team, they offer free roof inspections, so you are not out anything whenever they come out to your home, and they're not going to upsell you either. They'll let you know if it's time to do a whole new roof replacement, or maybe you just need a simple roof repair. Either way, the Pyramid team, they will get you all taken care of and make sure to get your roof winter ready. So if it is time to have that free roof inspection done, go ahead and give Josh a call today. You can find all of that contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Claire McCaskill, which I don't know, I can't quite figure out with her if it is a diminished mental capacity. I feel like that's kind of become a go-to when it comes to a lot of these Democrats, whether it's Pelosi or Biden or, some of the others. But some of the stuff that she says on MSNBC suggests that she is just a complete idiot. Listen to her. This is MSNBC, and she is talking about Pete Hegseth and some of the allegations against him and why that means that he should not be Secretary of Defense.
Back to a point that my colleague made a few minutes ago about the fact that this is a volunteer force. If you have scandals at the Department of Defense, if you have a leader that has engaged in public drunkenness and dishonorable behavior. And frankly, remember, even committing adultery is a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, much less serial adultery, much less dancing on the stage with strippers. These are all violations of the military code that you can, in fact, be prosecuted for under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. How are they going to recruit people to come into this military? How are young men and women going to go, yeah, that's where I want to go. I want to lay my life on the line to follow that guy into battle.
There's a lot.
There is a lot.
There's a lot in there.
Now, first out of the gate, do you think she's just stupid or lazy?
A little bit of both.
I think that it may be that. All right, first, I find it just hilarious. We're going to stereotype here that men in particular are going to not want to go into the military because the Secretary of Defense went to a strip club. I would actually suggest that most new recruits, talking about young people, particularly young men, couldn't tell you who the Secretary of Defense is today. Most people who decide to enlist aren't enlisting because of a Secretary of Defense, or not enlisting because of a specific Secretary of Defense. Now, you can have ongoing behavior in that position that creates a culture that results in a lack of recruitment, which is something that we've actually seen under this administration and under Lloyd Austin. But the word stupid is such a simplified word, but every once in a while, I do think it's a warranted word. And when it comes to Claire McCaskill, who's going to want to sign up for the military if the Secretary of Defense was accused of going to a strip club? Are you serious? What a dumb woman. This is a military that has voluntarily focused a disproportionate amount of its time on defending transgenderism and having, talk about strip shows, transgender shows on military bases. Some of the ad campaigns that they put out while you juxtapose it to Russia and China, in which it's all about grueling masculinity, the ad campaigns that the military have been running under the Biden administration have been about having two moms and about diversity and about, oh, my transgenderism is recognized. Not to mention DEI, in which there's been a focus on, oh, by the way, all of the white guys here, and some of the white gals too, are inherently racist and need to apologize for, pitting people within the military through lessons and instruction against one another based off race? Labeling individuals in the military who have a focus on the Constitution and history of the country in 1776 as potential domestic terrorists? We have seen with the attempt to divide the military from within by the current leadership and the focus on DEI and transgenderism and a kinder, gentler military, the consistent decline in recruitment. Given that and knowing that, Claire McCaskill thinks that, no, the real problem is that Pete Hegseth has been accused of going to strip clubs and drinking in public to excess. That's going to be the real hit on recruitment in the military. What an embarrassment she is. The only difficult thing to figure out about Claire McCaskill is, again, is she really that stupid or is she just lazy when it comes to commenting on these subject matters? I mean, jeez. What just absolute embarrassment. Do they I hope they don't introduce her as former senator from Missouri, do they?
I think they do.
Oh, jeez. I mean, of course they're going to say former senator, but you really have to throw the fact that we elected her in there so much. It's a little bit of mercy. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. And basic training in Oklahoma, very first time at a strip club, very first weekend pass. Half the platoon went to the same club. McCaskill's just stupid and knows nothing about military protocol. It's a rite of passage, LOL. Let's see. I'm pretty sure. Neither going to a gentleman's club nor being inebriated are prosecutable under UCMJ. I mean, I've been in 20 years. I went with my senior NCOs and officers. So, yeah. Uh, I don't know if Claire McCaskill is just that stupid or if she, and I know the audience, this is why I was talking about the laziness that some of it may be. She knows that audience, as diminished as it is going to just believe anything. So you don't really have to put much effort into it. And that's when I talk about the laziness, and perhaps that is part of the formula here, coming up with such absurd notions that they're going to believe everything I say anyway. So it's like, why put that much effort? It's like writing a story for kindergartners. Like, you don't really have to spend a lot of time on it. It's going to be pretty basic stuff because they're kindergartners. They're just going to be entertained with the fact that you are talking to them in a voice with inflections that keep their attention. And being on MSNBC with that audience in particular does invite that approach. And you know, maybe being on MSNBC has made her stupid. I mean, it could be that as well. Sometimes you adapt to your environment. If you are somebody who, you know, you're generally a pretty moral person and you start spending all your time with immoral people, you know, odds are you're going to become like them. And maybe being on a network filled with stupid idiots has altered her in a way that is clearly on full display. Springfield's Talk 104.1. Oh, no, wait. Okay, I was timing this out wrong, looking at the breaks. All right, we've got Santa's Angels. There's stuff I just didn't get to today. Maybe tomorrow. I love this. Missouri may lower required GPA levels for future middle and high school teachers. And one of the the comments on this remark, quote, this is in the news leader. While discussions about the issue often include the question, isn't this a case of lowering standards? We maintain that it's not. They're literally talking about lowering standards. Like, literally lowering the required GPA level for future and middle high school teachers. And while there may be some arguments people could put forth, the idea that, now, we don't consider this lowering. Somebody named Finley. I don't know their position. We'll talk about this tomorrow, first thing. Glenn Beck's next. I'm Nick Reed.